Welcome back to the New Jersey Morning Show. We continue our discussion about those mysterious drones that have been sighted flying over New Jersey, and we bring back meteorologist Mike Favetta to talk about some of the weather conditions needed to fly drones. Again, we were talking about the gusty winds and the rain that we've had in the last 24 hours or so. What weather conditions where drones could pose a risk to people on the ground because of storms and strong winds like that?
Right. So if you tuned into our live show on Thursday night, you heard all about, or rather Wednesday night, all about the various types of weather conditions that drones are certified to fly in because somebody has to be controlling the drones remotely, at least in this case. Now, with the 7 nights that we heard reports of confirmed drone sightings in New Jersey in November, plus the 3 nights of the confirmed drone reports in December, all of those evenings had good flying weather. That is, calm winds with nothing more than some daytime heat leaving the ground and clear skies. And those conditions are very conducive for flying visibly. And that is, you're able to see the drone from your house potentially, because the drones are not supposed to fly above 400 feet. Also, we have those earlier sunsets, so the shorter daylight hours allow for kind of covert conditions where the drones can go out and not be detected as easily, obviously because of the earlier sunsets. Now, when there's too much moisture in the air and when you have a little bit of a different type of weather scenario, a lot of times that promotes fog. And that's where it's unfavorable for flight because fog typically rides low to the ground. I mean, the definition of fog is a cloud at the ground, and that promotes reduced visibility, and that's where you have all that extra water vapor and turns into fog. There's also the concern with high winds. We haven't seen any reports of drones flying in those high winds because typically, and here's an airplane for example, if for example in the summertime when you have these storms develop, you get these downdrafts, and that creates a tailwind potentially knocking the drone out of the sky. And with very little buffer, with just a couple 100 feet from the ground to the flight level, that could cause some issues. So again, with that drone flight altitude, usually just a couple 100 feet up, technically it's supposed to be only up to 400 feet. You have that dry, calm weather, and it makes the navigation easier with less wind, just nothing more than a little bit of a breeze. But when there's damp weather, that tends to cause issues. We all know electronics and moisture, rain, they don't mix very well. And so when there's moisture in the air, especially warmer, less dense air, that could create some issues with the drone flying. So again, with warm air cooling by the ground above, you get that little bit of a temperature difference. That usually creates a little bit of fog. As we've seen certain mornings, anytime there's fog around, we haven't heard or seen any of those drones because of that reduced visibility. And because, again, there's that moisture component likely creating some hazards there. The bigger issue is the rain. Have not seen or heard of any of the confirmed drone sightings when there's rain. Not only is there the reduced visibility issue, but also, of course, the drone typically cannot fly in wet weather. So all of these weather scenarios kind of aligning, Kara, with what we've heard and seen with the reports, that it's just been the clear, calm nights that these drones have been reported flying low, under that 400-foot threshold, over people's homes and across most areas in New Jersey.
Yeah. So, Mike, I mean, just thinking, okay, we're already in the middle of December now. Typically, New Jersey has, some rough weather in the winter, certainly very cold weather. I mean, is any of that, as you kind of, and I know you can only look so far out meteorologically, but, are we looking at any sort of weather upcoming that would either prevent or possibly allow for these drones to fly again?
So I think that's a great question. Looking forward, are there any conditions during the evening hours, say between 5 p.m. when it gets dark up until about 10 p.m., the kind of the later side of when we hear these drone sightings in the evening hours? Are there good conditions for flying? And at least in the last few evenings, we've had the rain, we've had the very gusty winds, and now we have, while it's a little bit calmer this weekend on Saturday and Sunday, there will be more rain that comes in pretty persistently throughout the nights upcoming this Monday, this Tuesday, and even again this Wednesday and into next week. So there are limitations here. Don't forget, there's also the fact of the cold. As we know, these drones run on batteries. And if you're out in the cold, batteries and cold typically don't do well together, shortens a battery lifespan significantly. So extreme cold, something like tonight, for instance, where we have actual air temperatures down below the freezing mark, tomorrow morning as well into tomorrow night, temperatures down below the freezing mark. I think that could be a cause for maybe a little bit of an issue if these flights do happen. They might be shorter. If that's the case. But as we looked back over the 10 nights that the drones were confirmed sighted, half of those had temperatures that were below average, but they weren't below the freezing mark. So it's interesting to see now if these drones will go out where the weather is below the freezing mark. And that would be something new, at least to add to the analysis of tracking the weather along meteorologically and how that plays into these drone sightings, Karen.
Yeah. Mike, my only other thought, and I know only because I'm excited about it, I know coming up we have the winter solstice, and then we are going to start to get some more daylight starting in the next few weeks as well. So talk a little bit about just that solstice and what that means, and you know, how much daylight are we going to start to gain, and you know, does the daylight play a factor? These have been flying at night, but so maybe as the days start to get longer, quote unquote, you know, that might be a factor as well.
Oh, sure. I mean, considering if you were looking to fly something without being seen in the early evening hours, this would be the time of year to do it, especially with sunset shortly after 4:30 p.m. It gets pitch black by 5. And so with, you know, still kind of in that working hours timeline, you would have pretty decent weather. It's also been warmer than average the last few weeks. You know, the first drone sighting was about a month ago, and that's when we had afternoon highs in the 80s. It was still very warm in the beginning of November. Very unusual, obviously.
Yes, it was.
So to have Right, so to kind of have the stars aligning, if you will, for all the ingredients to come in order, an early sunset, you have it nice and dark earlier in the day, and then weather that's pretty favorable with the calm winds, clear sky, and mild temperatures comparatively. First half of the month was well above average. In fact, November 2024 was the warmest month on record globally by a long shot. And so we saw the effects of that here in New Jersey, obviously the first half of the month with that mild weather. So looking ahead, yes, I think that the conditions may not be as good temperature-wise, but there are some rain chances ahead in the future. And as we've seen, probably not going to see many more flights. Regarding daylight hours, we start to see a big uptick in the amount of daylight we get per day starting in February. So we still have about 2 months where that sun is setting before 5 p.m. Before we start to see those daylight hours coming longer, at least in the late part of winter, early part of spring. But a good 2 months left of those really dark evenings.
Listen, I'm still going to say it's going to start getting lighter longer in 2 weeks, not 2 months, okay?
Okay.
Mike,
Positive
stay right
thinking.
where you are. We appreciate your analysis on this. I always love when we bring on Professor Mike. Coming up in just a little bit, though, how one diner is spreading some holiday cheer throughout their community.